Can blockchain help competitors cooperate? So blockchain as a technology really is about collaboration in a lot of ways. And that includes, and maybe even especially includes, collaboration between parties whose interests are at odds. Blockchain offers some properties that will help to smooth the rough edges when people who don't normally get along or don't normally trust each other want to collaborate. In this video, I'm talking about horizontal blockchain consortiums, and I'm distinguishing that from vertical blockchain consortiums, using the terms horizontal and vertical in the same way that economists use those when we talk about firms merging. So you have horizontal and vertical mergers, and I think the same economic literature that applies well in that situation will also apply well to blockchain consortiums. And in particular, when we think of two companies merging, the government oftentimes sues those companies and does not allow the merger, saying that it's anti-competitive or that it's going to be bad for the population as a whole. And of course, that court case is not always straightforward. Oftentimes there's a good argument to merge, and there's a good argument to disallow the merge. But blockchain consortiums, I think, are really going to add this third option. Sometimes you can get the benefits of merging without actually merging. So first of all, is it an oxymoron for competitors to collaborate? And of course, the answer is no. We've seen competitors collaborating in many different contexts in the past. As a matter of fact, there are 4 big ways that happens. One is co-ops. And so we're going to talk about what does that look like, what has that looked like in the past, and how might blockchain enable more of that. Another way competitors have collaborated is simply by merging. So we'll talk about what does that look like if we were to use a blockchain instead of merging. Third, one way that competitors can collaborate is by using an intermediary that facilitates that collaboration. And finally, of course, the new way that competitors can collaborate is through blockchains. So first we have the co-op. This is a classic way that firms can cooperate. And the example I'd like to use is the Got Milk campaign. So this happened, it was more common in the late 90s, early 2000s, but it was this campaign of milk advertisements of people with milk mustaches. So an interesting thing about that campaign is that there was no brand names attached to those advertisements. That means this was funded by a group of competing milk producers, dairy farmers and such, who got together to say, wait a second, we recognize that there's really 2 decisions people make when they decide about their milk. The first decision is how much milk to drink, and then the second decision, which happens after that one, is which brand to buy. And the producers recognized we could invest in trying to get people to drink more milk, and if that happens, it's going to raise the boats of everybody in the industry. And so even though we're competitors around that second question, which brand of milk to buy, we're at odds. Around the first question, we all really just want people to drink more milk. And maybe that first question is actually more important for sales than the second question is in a lot of cases. So these milk producers came together to fund this campaign. And in a lot of ways, that milk campaign had properties of a public good among the population of milk producers. So let's look at that. Why is this kind of public good like? There's 2 properties of a public good. One is that it's non-rival. So one company's benefiting from the population drinking more milk does not hurt another company's benefiting from the population drinking more milk. So if that campaign worked successfully, it's not zero sum for the milk producers in the co-op or even in the country, whether or not they join the co-op. And then the second property of a public good is that it's non-excludable. So that means if we fund this milk campaign, it's impossible to exclude any particular milk producer from the benefits of the increased milk consumption that results from the campaign. And that's absolutely true. Among milk producers, even if you contributed nothing to the campaign, you would still benefit. So this campaign really is a public good among the milk producers. And public goods problems are going to be one of the things that blockchain will help give us tools to solve. And once you start to look for public goods problems, you'll see them in a lot of different contexts. especially with firms, a lot of times they would really benefit if they invested in some kind of infrastructure. And this could be an online infrastructure, a database, a way of collecting data, a network of people, and many different companies could pull from the same digital resource if they collectively invested in this. But then we have to ask the question, if this is so good for these companies, why don't we see more co-ops out there? Why is it pretty rare to see these industry organizations where competitors are coming together to collaborate? Well, there's a number of issues. One is that it can be really difficult to figure out who contributes how much. Everybody wants everyone else to contribute all the money and them to reap the benefits. And so figuring out, should everybody contribute the same amount? Well, that's probably not fair if we're thinking of big dairy farmers and small dairy farmers. Of course, the big dairy farmers probably should contribute more than the small ones. So size, but how do you even measure size? And so you could imagine battles ensuing when competitors are coming together to try to figure out the nitty-gritty details of how the co-op would work. And then there's also power issues. If you're a small competitor, maybe you would benefit from participation, but maybe you don't trust some of the big competitors. You think they'll figure out ways of gaming the system in their favor because they just have a lot more resources to put towards figuring out the power dynamic. So the trust issues and the complicated, detailed questions are going to stop a lot of firms from entering into these co-op agreements when that would be beneficial to the industry. So in a lot of ways, you can think of a blockchain consortium a little bit like a co-op. Now, what tools does blockchain bring to the table for these companies that are coming together to cooperate? Well, partially you can think of this as a sort of online space where there's more intentional governance at play, where there's much more transparency because, of course, everything that's done gets recorded permanently and irrevocably on the blockchain. And then there's smart contracts that are very easy to use and easy to put onto a blockchain that can help facilitate the different kind of contractual relationships that might need to be set up. And of course, there's good data about which of these smart contracts are working, about what happens when different smart contracts are executed, and that's going to make things a little bit more even in terms of a level playing field, a transparent playing field. Some of the fears about power dynamics are overcome through the nature of this blockchain space that can be used as a consortium slash co-op for these companies to come together. Now, let me talk a little bit more about what I mean by the term horizontal blockchain consortium, because this, of course, is analogous to horizontal mergers in the economics literature. Horizontal basically just means the firms that play the same role in the industry. It isn't that one firm is selling to another firm, it's that both firms are serving the same function from the customer's perspective. So examples of horizontal mergers that have either happened or been contenders to happen include Staples and Office Depot, Walmart and Target, Facebook and Instagram, Pixar and Disney, Aetna and Blue Cross Blue Shield. All those companies are similar in the functions they play. Those kinds of mergers are horizontal mergers, and we can contrast horizontal mergers to vertical mergers, where vertical mergers are companies that used to be selling to each other in some sort of upstream, downstream supply chain that are now merged under one company. And I might like to use the example of the coffee bean farmer sells to Starbucks, who then sells to a grocery store. So if those three companies who each sell to each other in this upstream, downstream supply chain, if those were to merge, that would be a vertical merger. And I'm using the same terminology when we're talking about blockchain consortiums. Now, when the government tries to stop a merger from happening, it's usually because the government is afraid that the main reason these companies are trying to merge is to gain market power, to gain monopoly power, to increase the prices for consumers. That's anti-competitive. So there's two different government agencies that try to stop this. There's the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. They both kind of do the same thing. But in these lawsuits, of course, the companies that are trying to merge are generally going to argue that there's economies of scale and economies of scope to be had if they were to merge. And I do think the question that blockchains will raise in these court cases is going to be, could you achieve the same economies of scale and economies of scope by using a blockchain consortium rather than actually merging? So that's a question that I think will be big in the future. This is one of the reasons blockchain is exciting. It could make the industries much more competitive. It could reduce market consolidation. It's been a natural force in the economy, and it could sort of reverse that trend. So that's horizontal blockchain consortiums. That's how they're used to help competitors cooperate. And I will likely do another video on vertical blockchain consortiums, because that's the one that we're seeing a lot of having to do with supply chains, and that's also a very important application of blockchain.